We had to pass through Vernon Square to reach the Vault-Tec Regional Headquarters, which we explored in Part 2 of my short series on Agatha's Song. While we were there, we discovered a metro station called the Abernathy Station. We find it on the eastern end of Vernon Square. The unique thing about this station is that it's the second to the last stop on the White Line. The last stop is Tacoma. As an explorer, I've got to know what's at the end of this metro line. And so heading back to Vernon Square East, we can head down the escalator and pass through the gate to the Abernathy Station. Inside, we immediately get attacked by super mutants.
Over here. You like...
Vernon Square was swarming with them. Looks like a few came down here to fight the ghouls. While looting their corpses, we get attacked by another down on the platform. And peering over the edge, we find Mirelurk Kings.
Got one. Need some help with this one. Anybody there?
These super mutants must have just recently entered the metro station. Otherwise, they would have torn these Mirelurk Kings to pieces. But where there are Mirelurks, there is water. Somewhere deeper on, the station must be flooded. After looting the corpses and containers down here, we have to go down the escalator. There's no other station connected to this platform. At the bottom, turning around, we see a sign that says Eastbound something station, but it's hard to read. Taking a look at the map, we see that the train tunnel continues off to the east. Looks like this western path may be a dead end. But we'll head down here first. Who knows, maybe we can find some loot. As we pass by some fencing, we see a pressure switch, and after deactivating it, our companions trip a bunch of frag mines on the tracks. Dog meat missed one. We can go ahead and deactivate that. And heading back, we see that the pressure switch was attached to a rigged shotgun. Our reward for passing through this gauntlet is a stash of goods in a nook to the south. Here we find an average locked floor safe with caps, energy cells, and a stealth boy inside, and a Nuka-Cola Quantum on a nearby shelf. After looting the toolbox and boxes here, one of which had some railway spikes inside, we can turn around to see that this was a dead end. This room is filled in with rubble. We can loot some Nuka-Cola from a nearby Nuka-Cola machine, loot some lockers, and then rest on a mattress if we need to. But when done, we've got to turn around and head back out. Back on the train platform, we see that the other tunnel going west is filled in with rubble. Turning around, we find a huge pile of rubble off to the southeast. Looks like this escalator and elevated platform has completely collapsed. We don't find much over here, just a trash can and a couple of chairs. This means our only way forward is to continue east down the tracks. And here we find more Mirelurk Kings. These tracks are partially flooded, but we can hug the walls to stay out of the water. We see the end of this track blocked with rubble and broken fencing. This is the White Line, and we see that we can go eastbound to Tacoma Station, or westbound, the way we just came from, back to Abernathy Station. So it looks like we're going the right way. Continuing past the twisted fencing, we see that this tube is blocked up with rubble, but that the tube next to it continues to the east. And here we find more Mirelurk Kings. This tube then ends in rubble, but reconnects to the other one through a gap in the wall. The sign on the wall again tells us that this leads to eastbound Tacoma Station. The tube bends around to the right, but the end is blocked with rubble, though we do find a utility path off to the left. After killing the Mirelurk Kings, we can loot some lockers in this gap, and then head through it to the north to the end of the other tube. Following it to the east, we enter the Tacoma Station, and this is an absolute catastrophe. I don't even know where all of this cement could have possibly come from. Maybe a road above collapsed into the terminal. And here we find more Mirelurks. This is Tacoma Station, the last stop on the White Line. I jumped around all these big boulders and slabs of concrete to see if there was anything up here, but no, there wasn't. So to continue, we need to head up the ramp to the north to kill even more Mirelurks.
Bring it! Enough.
In the nearby bathrooms, we find Mirelurk egg clutches, a great place to get Mirelurk meat, but we don't find any interesting loot. We can loot some Nuka-Cola from a Nuka-Cola machine, some nearby lockers, but the ticket booth is blocked in with rubble, so we don't find anything interesting there. At the end, we find a metal gate that leads to Takoma Park. On the other side, we can crouch down to make sure we're not observed. We creep out and we see ruined shops before us. Turning around, we see a big cement wall, so there's nothing behind us, and there appears to be an overpass of a freeway traveling above us. Moving forward, we can see some of these pre-war signs. We buy and sell nifty thrifties. 99 cents, fast cash, stereo, TV, guns, pots and pans, computers, tools, cars, new, used. Okay, so that's a thrift store. And then we find a cornucopia fresh grocery store. We see these all over the Capital Wasteland, not unique to this place. There's a bank, but we don't see any enemies. So I felt comfortable enough to stand up. Heading to an alleyway next to the bank, we can loot a trash bin. Ow! Well, where did they come from? Come on! Whew. After the super mutants are dead, we can loot the corpses. We see that the road continues on to the northeast, but before we go that way, let's explore everything we just passed. We see the freeway going from north to south, but we can't get up there. No road, no steps, and rubble blocks our path. So turning around, we can check out this thrift store. We see signs on the wall, sale, sale, and on the door a sticker, everything must go, now open. Heading inside, we find a rather conventional home. It's not very big in here at all. To the north, we find some bookshelves covered in appliances. 10% off, 50% off, sale. Posters on the wall, sale, sale, sale. And then hanging on a hat rack is a unique item. The Tacoma Park Little Leaguer cap. This cap grants us +5 to explosives and +5 to melee weapons. Now, even though it doesn't list it here, the code of the game shows us that the hat also grants us a bonus of +5 melee damage when using baseball bats. The explosives and melee weapons bonuses are the same as if we were to take the Little Leaguer perk, but these bonuses stack with the perk. In the vanilla game of Fallout 3, this hat is just a solid red color, but it is a completely unique item, and I must have a mod installed that gave it its own unique look. On the bill it says, Tacoma Park Little League. I link to a complete list of all of the mods I used for Fallout 3 in the description below. We see 2 doors from this entryway. Moving east, we find a bit of a kitchen, strange for a thrift shop. This must have been someone's home that they just also used as a thrift store. We don't find much in the kitchen. Moving to the south, we find an office with a cash register. Must be where people came to pay for their goods. This connects back to the entryway room, and then we can turn south into the bathroom. Even the toilet is for sale. We see a big for sale sign on the tank. But that's it for the nifty thrifty shop. When done, we can head back out the door to Tacoma Park. Off in the distance, we see a lovely Captain Cosmo's billboard. I really wish I could watch an episode. But there's nothing left to explore to the west, so turning around, we can walk up the road to the east. We see little fenced-off patios near to some of these homes and storefronts. One has a Nuka-Cola machine with some Nuka-Cola inside. Another has a bit of a grocer's or something. We see a refrigerator outside, which is strange, and then some grocery shelves. The contents were knocked off by the explosions from the fight, but we can walk away with 3 boxes of sugar bombs. We'll save these for Murphy. But the explosion didn't budge a first aid kit, which we can loot on the shelf. There isn't anything interesting on any of the other patios, so continuing up the road to the east, we arrive at a fork, and we find more mutants off to the northeast.
Where? Keep them pinned. Good enough. That enough? Teach you to Where?
We had to run off to the northeast to kill these mutants. After looting their bodies, we see that we're on Carroll Street. And looks like there's something off here to the south, so we're going to move south first before heading up Carroll Street. We find a Pulowski preservation shelter, and it was occupied. Inside, we find the corpse of a wastelander with some dirty water and jet on her inventory. Next to her is an ammunition box. She must have gone in here to hide from the super mutants. Her corpse has not decayed yet. The road continues between these buildings to the south, but it's blocked in with rubble, though we do find a delivery truck here. Climbing the rubble just a bit, we can jump into the back of the truck, and at the end, we find 3 ammunition boxes, one of which is locked with an easy lock. Here we also find 3 pre-war skeletons. But heading out of the truck, we see that this is a dead end. So to continue, we can turn around and go east up Carroll Street. We see a bit of a tent protected by sandbag barricades here. Inside we find 2 beds, one of which has 2 ammo canisters and 2 first aid kits. And we can sleep on the other one to get well rested if we want. Heading out of the tent, we see a ruined barber shop across the street, but no way to go inside and explore. Continuing up the hill to the east, we see that Carroll Street ends, completely blocked in with cement and rubble. However, we do find an open door to the north, which brings us inside this building. We see a staircase going up, but the top of the staircase is blocked with scrap metal and a bed. We can't get up there, so instead we need to go through a northern door. We find a bathroom here with nothing in it, and then a door taking us outside. So we can walk right through this building to explore another part of suburban Takoma Park. This must have been a high-end area before the war. Lots of beautiful brick buildings and fenced-off gardens. In this garden, we find some garden gnomes and a grill. We see one adjacent garden, but nothing here, and a few other adjacent gardens, but we can't reach them. There's no gate in the fence, and we can't climb these rocks. So to continue, we have to turn north. This path splits to the west and east. We'll start by going west, which then turns north. And then we see Talon Company? Racing down the hill, we find the Talon Company in a firefight with super mutants. And we discover Tacoma Industrial.
Bring it!
What was Talon Company doing all the way out here? We see a big factory behind us. Some towering water tanks? Is that what those are? And a big pool nearby. After looting the corpses, we can explore the back of a truck, but there's nothing here. We find a staircase up to the east to a platform that just has more rubble. Turning west, we see that these big tanks connect to the factory and then terminate inside this nearby pool. I don't know if this factory was using this pool of water as a coolant source or if they were dumping something here. I'm thinking it may be the latter, as we do see barrels and barrels of toxic radioactive waste lining this sickly green pool. We see glowing fungus and brain fungus all the way around it. But it's not very deep. We can wade through it, but it never gets deep enough to swim. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything, so heading back through the broken fence, we can this time go up the eastern path, but we see that it just loops around, connecting to the northern path. So we didn't miss anything. This path leads only to Tacoma Industrial. Back on the other side of the fence, we see a couple of paths forward. There appears to be a gate to the west, and then a gap in the buildings to the north. Looking west again, I think I see a door in the side of the factory on that platform. Well, let's start by going through this gap in the building to the north. Here we find a bunch of blood spatter all over the ground, but no body. Turning west, we see a path that goes around this brick building, but it's a dead end. Turning around, we see a staircase to the east, leading to a platform, but nothing up here. And then another staircase to the north, leading to another platform, and here we find a door to the factory. Door to factory. We'll head in here in a minute, but before we go in there, I want to see where this other path goes. Heading west, we see the gate at the end of the road and then a staircase leading up to another platform with more bodies to loot. Here we find another door that again leads to factory. Turning around, we go down the steps and we see that we can interact with this gate. Well, let's start by exploring this factory, and once done, we'll head back out and go through the gate. We find mutants on the other side of the door.
That's it. Boy. There you are.
When the mutants are dead, we can try to get our bearings. There's a floating pod in front of us connected to the ground by a staircase to the west. There's a staircase to the east going up, and then a small staircase leading down to the ground floor. We'll go down for now. After looting the bodies, we see a bit of a conveyor belt here. It looks like this may have been an Abraxo cleaner factory. We find Abraxo cleaner all over the conveyor belts, and bins at the end of the conveyor belts collecting more Abraxo cleaner. Does this mean that Tacoma Industrial was responsible for creating Abraxo cleaner? Or was this a company that the Abraxo company simply hired to manufacture their cleaner? Well, it must be the latter, because we already know from established Fallout lore that Abraxo cleaner was made by the Abraxidine company. They must simply hire Tacoma Industries to manufacture it. Passing another conveyor belt to the east, we see signs of super mutant habitation. We find a campfire lit behind some machinery and a bathtub filled with gore parts. It looks like the mutants were chopping it up into little bits, and we find the skeleton of a human torso. On the ground, we find some 10mm rounds and some 5.56mm rounds next to a stew pot. That's everything for this ground floor, except we do find a short staircase to the east. Heading that way, we find another mutant. Looting this ground area, we find even more Abraxo cleaner and a desk covered in turpentine. In one of the wooden boxes, we find some Psycho and some dirty water next to it, and another big tub of Abraxo cleaner. Heading up a short stairway to the east, we can turn around and see a long staircase leading all the way to the top of this structure. Before we go up there, let's explore this ground area. We see lots of boxes. In one, we find a stash of railway spikes. There's a wooden box on top of the stack of boxes, and inside we find one container of buff out. There are bookshelves to the east, and on the bottom of the third one, next to a red toolbox, we find a copy of Lying Congressional Style, which improves our speech. After looting more containers, we find a door to the south leading to Tacoma Park, Opening the door, we see that this leads to the concrete platform that we saw in that gap between the buildings near to the truck, where we saw that blood spatter. Okay, well now we know where this goes. Heading back inside, we now have two paths before us, the staircase in this room and the staircase in the last room. We'll start by heading up the staircase in this room. At the top, we find some wooden planks, and on top of the planks is a human skeleton and another box of Abraxo cleaner. But at the bottom of the box of of Abraxo cleaner. If we pick out all of the boxes, we find 1 dose of jet. After knocking off a drum that's in our way, we see another door that leads outside. Door to Tacoma Park. Well, I have no idea where this is going to go. Maybe it's the way out, and I want to finish exploring before we leave, so heading back down the stairs and into the other room, we can now go up the staircase to the east. This leads to a floating pod, which has another door. In a box in this pod, we find 1 Rad-X and a door to Tacoma Park. Oh great, another way out. Well, which one do we choose? Well, before we take either door, let's finish exploring this factory by turning around and going up this staircase to the west. At the top of the staircase, we find the corpse of a Talon Company merc. I get the impression that the Talon Company had been here in Tacoma Park, exploring for some reason, when they were ambushed, surprised by a bunch of super mutants. We stumbled upon the scene just after the mutants arrived. At the end of this gantry, we find another floating pod. Here we can loot the corpse of the super mutant master we killed earlier, and we find a little nook with a first aid box and 2 ammo boxes. On a shelf to the east, we find a stew pot with mentats and jet inside. Backing out of this nook, we find a desk with a terminal. Some lore. Oh, wait. Oh, this is booby-trapped. We see the detonation trigger on the rear panel. Accessing the panel, we can defuse the terminal, but sadly, we don't get any lore. After looting the last few containers in this floating pod, we see that it's a dead end. Backing out of the pod, we see some boards forming a ramp to a girder to the north. Is that a ladder over there? Leaping over, sure enough, we see it's a ladder leading down to a concrete platform. But as we try to climb down the ladder, all the boards slide off. They weren't fixed very well. Well, it looks like we're not going back up that way. On this platform, we see some machinery, a human skeleton, a bunch of tools, and at the very end, we are rewarded with a Nuka-Cola Quantum and some purified water. Well, we can't go back up to that pod, so leaping down to the ground floor, we now have to choose one of these 2 doors. We'll start by heading back up the staircase to the east and going through the eastern door in this pod to Tacoma Park. We arrive in another floating pod. We see the corpse of a Talon Company merc, some jet next to his body, and a sniper rifle. I don't remember killing this guy. He must have been killed by the super mutants that had recently invaded Tacoma Park. We find 2 ammunition boxes here, 1 locked with an easy lock, and we see that this is a great sniper's roost. There are 2 windows, one facing south, one facing north. The southern window overlooks that big, milky, irradiated pond we saw when we arrived. And off in the distance, looks like we missed one. Got him. Turning around, we can look out the other window, and we see that it overlooks that rear door to the factory. But we've already been there, and there's nothing there. So this is a dead end. Turning around, we can go back into the factory, and this leaves 1 path remaining. Retracing our steps, we can go down to the ground floor, through the eastern door to the next room, up this eastern staircase, and out the northern door to Tacoma Park. We arrive on a concrete platform overlooking... Is that a river? We see more of that murky water. We see a staircase to the southwest, and at the top we can overlook utter devastation. Skyscrapers and office buildings crumbling before us. There is a truck and a big pile of rubble blocking our path to the northwest. But then...
Hey! Where? Had enough?
Continuing to the bottom, we see big barriers preventing us from leaping into this water, and as we continue along, we see a tripwire. This must have been connected to a pipe that we see above us briefly as we pass under it. Grenades would have likely fallen out of it had we not disarmed the tripwire. After looting the bodies, we see that this platform curves to the south where we find another super mutant. There's a staircase leading down to the murky water below. We see a lit campfire in front of a tent, and then a path off to the south. There is another path to the east, but it appears to be blocked with rubble. Heading towards the tent, we see the campfire is lit. We can loot the super mutant, and inside the tent, we find the corpse of a Talon Company merc. Okay, so these tents must have belonged to the Talon Company. They were listening to Enclave Radio. We can go ahead and turn that off. We find an arm wire and a stack of metal boxes. Not much in any of them, but a big stack of first aid boxes and ammo canisters to the southwest. Here we find a bed where we can rest for the night so that we can wake up well rested. The next morning we can leave the tent, and now we have to choose a path. And do we go south down this alley, east towards that rubble, or down the stairs to the north to the water? We'll start by going south down this alley. At the very end, we find boards forming a ramp that leads over this fence. Oh, and this fence blocks our path to that irradiated pool just outside Tacoma Industrial. I see, so this is our way out. Everything else is blocked with rubble, so turning around, we can head back north and this time go down the eastern path. But we see that this eastern path is also blocked in with rubble. But there is something beyond. I wonder if we can get back there. Turning around, we can jump down into this murky water. It is irradiated. In my full suit of T-51 power armor, I was getting 1 rad per second. And it's deep enough to swim in. Swimming to the northwest, we see that staircase next to the tent that we saw earlier. This leads us back up, but let's head back to the water and swim through this man-made river. See if we can find anything interesting. Eventually, we see that our path is blocked by a bunch of metal scaffolding or something that has fallen in our way. Climbing over it, we can then drop down to the right and swim behind it. This way we can explore the rest of this little river. Swimming to the very end, we see that truck lying on top of the pile of rubble that we saw when we first got to this section, but we can't scale it. Turning around, however, we do see a concrete lip. Can we get onto that? No, we can't get onto that lip from here. But jumping back in the water, we see a pipe, and we can climb atop the pipe. We see that someone has created a little bit of a ramp between these pipes with scrap metal. Using it as a ramp, we can then leap atop that concrete lip. Following it east, it opens up with a gap to the north. Heading between these buildings, the path comes to a T. It's blocked off to the left, but continues to the east. Following it all the way to the end, we find a crater filled with water and feral ghouls. Ooh, and one of them's a reaver. That about does it, I think. After looting the ghouls, we can head down to the water. This tiny lake appears to be highly irradiated. We see radioactive particles floating from the surface and radioactive mist. But thanks to our T-51 suit of power armor, we're only getting 1 rad per second. Off to the east, we see some sort of makeshift structure. There's a little shack here filled with goods and a terminal. And then looking to the northeast, we see 2, what is that? Bodies. These are the bodies of Isabella Proud and Jason. On Isabella's corpse, we find a radiation suit and some scientific gear. And then on Jason's suit, we find a 10mm pistol and another radiation suit with more scientific gear. What were these people doing here? Well, heading back up to what must have been their makeshift camp, we find a 3rd radiation suit and a bunch of goods. Surgical tubing, many bottles of Rad-X, empty syringes, Rad-Away stacked on one shelf, 10mm rounds on another, and then to the southwest on a table we find Isabella Proud's terminal. Journal at Software, 2072, PageSoft. Isabella Proud's journal. Day 45. Jason found a terminal suitable to our needs in the nearby ruins. With some work, we may be able to move this workstation closer to where our research has been taking place. Must keep an eye out for a portable source of power. Must remember to translate my notes onto this thing when I have some time to do so. While Jason was scavenging the ruins, I caught a glimpse of the group by the pool in the afternoon. Contrary to what most people think, they don't fear daylight at all, but they do seem to prefer indoor habitats. Preferring indoor habitats? What is she talking about? Ghouls? In the next one, Day 51. I've conducted an informal experiment this week. I've filled some heavy basins with water, each with different levels of radiation. Consistent with my predictions, they seem to prefer water with high rad content. Thanks to these radiation suits, I was able to irradiate one of the basins with a typically lethal level of radiation. And to my amazement, this has worked better than any of our attempts at constructing a lure to attract them into our research area. This is very exciting. So Isabella and Jason are researching ghouls, and they were using irradiated water to lure them in. Dangerous experiment, and I think we know how this ended. In the next one, day 53, Jason's recovered and repaired a generator, which should allow us to move this terminal and some of my equipment out to a better position for observation of the group's behavior. Maybe the tents we found, first in the middle of the street by the marketplace, and then right next to this man-made river, belonged to Isabel Proud. Perhaps those tents were her and Jason's research bases before moving deeper into the ruins. Maybe only after they abandoned the tents did Talon Company and then the super mutants take them over. In the next one, day 58, amazing! Today I was approached by one of them. I've decided to call her Melinda. I'm not actually sure if there's a way to establish gender, but Melinda moved in a way that appeared very feminine to me. She caught me off guard while I was checking water levels in the experimental basins. For a moment there, I wished I had taken that damned pistol Jason insisted upon me carrying. She grasped my arm, but instead of attacking, she appeared to sniff my arm where some of the scavenged resin I've been using to irradiate the basins had spilled on my suit. Moments later, she was gone. Must consider some way of tagging them. Ha! Well, we knew that ghouls are attracted to radioactive sources, but can it also fool them into thinking that humans are not prey? Apparently, if this terminal entry is to be believed. In the next one, day 63, no sign of the group for days. Could Melinda have returned to the group with some news of our brief encounter? Perhaps they're scared of us? Jason's beginning to get concerned, but I believe we're close to learning what we came here for. The poor man's been through hell for me. I don't know if I could have achieved so much without him, but there's so much left to learn. In the next one, day 67, I insisted on sleeping at the research site last night, much to Jason's protest. I'm sure I saw motion in the far ruins, but the moon had slid behind a cloud, so I couldn't make out for certain their shapes. I don't think mutants would have moved like that, and most people in the city know enough to hunker down at night. Could it have been our group returning home? In the next one, day 68, slept outdoors again last night. Jason insisted on staying with me this time and built a camouflage screen for us to sleep in. I irradiated the main body of water as heavily as I could to try and draw them out. My plan seems to have worked because I saw a few. I think Melinda was among them. Come into the open at dusk and settle into the water. After dark, one I believe to be the alpha male, I've called him Samuel, emerged with the rest of the group. I had to switch my Geiger counter off when he arrived to avoid being heard. I can't imagine the radiation levels the glowing ones must be infused with. I think that must be why he's the alpha. The others are so drawn to him because of his immense radiation. So she irradiated the nearby pond? All for this experiment? This has gone far beyond scientific inquiry and straight into recklessness. This pond will now be irradiated for God knows how many centuries, just because she wanted to see what would happen. But then again, the whole wasteland is irradiated. How much more damage would this one irradiated pond do? Could one make the argument that the research produced by this act is worth it? And in the last one, day 75, I need to make contact again. I've coated my suit in resin and will try approaching the group tomorrow at dusk. Observation hasn't revealed anything new. Direct contact is required if I'm going to continue to learn about them. I know Jason would never understand, but this won't work if his suit isn't also irradiated. I'll coat it while he's gone scavenging during the afternoon, and we'll set up camp tonight by the water before dusk. Well, this is just bad science. One time she had resin on her suit, and a ghoul left her alone. That doesn't mean that every time a ghoul is going to leave her alone if she has resin on the suit. It doesn't mean that resin protects her from a feral ghoul attack. She just coated her suit with a resin she knows attracts ghouls, and then without Jason's knowledge, coated his as well. She put Jason's life in danger without giving him an opportunity to say no. Is this how she repays the man who's been scavenging for her, protecting her, caring for her? What was it that killed Isabella Proud and her husband, friend, boyfriend, research assistant? Jason. Was it the heavy layers of radioactive resin that she spread all over the suits? Or were the suits simply not enough for the prolonged exposure to the highly radioactive pools she created here in this pit? Before we can leave, we get rushed by a glowing one. Oh, and his name is Samuel. This is the, quote, alpha male that Isabel Proud described in her terminal, the one that was so highly radioactive that he attracted all of the other ghouls. And this, I think, is the most likely explanation for Isabella and Jason's death. They simply underestimated the murderous ferocity of these feral ghouls, treating them like pets or favored wild animals being researched instead of the mindless monsters that they are. Isabella ends up appearing naive and reckless, and this naivety and recklessness led to her death and the death of the man who cared about her. As we explore the perimeter of this pool, we don't really find a way out. We do see one alleyway completely buried in rubble, but the slabs form a little bit of a path. Climbing over them at the very end, we find an impassable wall, but just before it, we find a human skeleton and a bin filled with goods. A Chinese rifle, some Radaway in the bin, and then 2 ammunition boxes filled with ammunition. But this alleyway is a dead end, and that means this lake is a dead end, so the only way to continue is to go back the way we came. But there was one path that we haven't explored yet. Back on the other side of the river, we can climb those planks to scale the fence, where we arrive back at the highly irradiated pond just outside Tacoma Industrial. Now, we can follow the road west and open the gate. On the other side of the gate, we see a few ruined trucks, and someone has formed a ramp with scrap wood leading to the top of this blue one. This one overlooks a courtyard off to the southwest, and we find someone here. Or the remains of someone here. Lying dead on his back and missing his head is a mercenary. Not Talon Company? On his corpse, we find a rifle, armor, ammunition, and the Tacoma Park artillery note. Examining it in our inventory, Artillery Order number 447, Talon Company Support Team Bravo, location Tacoma Park. Establish position near the parking lot west of the factory and monitor enemy movement. 3 squads will be dispatched once you are in position. Their objective is retake our old positions in Tacoma Park. Your directive is to provide artillery support when they arrive. The coordinates have been encoded on the switch provided. Call in the strikes once Alpha Squad establish a base of fire outside the blast range. So it looks like we were right. Talon Company was indeed here first, and the super mutants invaded. Talon Company then hired this mercenary to launch an artillery strike at the super mutants once Talon Company backup arrives. But we just killed them all, didn't we? They were under attack by super mutants when we arrived, but we did kill a few Talon Company. Was that the support team, or are they yet to come? On this table, we find 3 first aid kits, and off in the distance, oh no, a super mutant behemoth. On the table, we find a yellow switch. Pressing it, whoa! It only fires twice, though. So the Talon Company mercenaries have artillery cannons nearby? These guys are way better armed than a typical mercenary group. What is the deal here? we see that the artillery barely even scratched the super mutant. We can punch this thing as many times as we want to watch the artillery fire sail on in and explode in the middle of this parking lot. But it doesn't appear to even scratch this super mutant behemoth, so we must resort to our own metal. And a little bit of alien technology goes a long way. With the super mutant behemoth dead, we can explore our surroundings. This is a large area, but we bypassed a bunch of stuff to beeline towards this truck. So turning around, we can explore what we missed. We see another truck trailer over here. And in the northern corner, we see a little bit of a ramp built on top of it. However, there's nothing up here, just a big pile of tires. And going behind them, we see that they're empty. Oh, wait.
Look what we have. Where?
Talon Company?
Keep firing!
Was this the sniper team that was coming to attack the mutants with the artillery? But they were coming up right behind me. And now we understand the tires on the truck. That was a sniper's roost. After pressing the button, Talon Company was gonna come up behind me and fortify themselves on top of the trucks behind the tires. Had we not killed the behemoth ourselves and then immediately turned around, we would have been sandwiched between a super mutant behemoth and an entire Talon Company sniper battalion. No wonder Talon Company hired some other mercenary to push the button. None of their guys wanted to be in that position. Good thing we moved before they got set up. They even had a Protectron with them. These guys came well armed. After looting the Talon Company corpses, we can head back to that parking lot area to loot the behemoth. And this is indeed the reward for our efforts. Tons of ammunition, a mini-nuke, missiles, a full suit of recon armor, and a bunch of other stuff. Surveying the landscape, we do see a store nearby. This is Tacoma Motor, service and repair. After looting a Nuka-Cola machine outside, we can head through the front door. Inside, we see a bit of a waiting area to the right by a coffee machine, a stack of boxes to the east, and then a large display shopping area to the south. We don't find anything on the shelves, but heading behind the receptionist desk, we find another desk, and upon it is a copy of U.S. Army 30 handy flamethrower recipes, which improves our big gun skill. This room connects to the garage to the west. We see a bunch of car rims and tires strewn everywhere. On the other side of the room, we find a few containers on some shelves. There's a bottle of Buff Out in one. And we see a big car propped up in the middle of this garage. Since this is a two-door, this must be an Atomic V8, but it is in a poor state. The light in this room is on, powered by a nearby red generator. There is one more shelf to the northwest. In a box at the bottom, we find 2 bundles of pre-war money, but the boxes above this are empty. When done looting, we can leave by going out the way we came or opening the garage door. Back outside, we can explore this parking lot by going in a counterclockwise fashion. We see cars still in parking spaces and some piled on top of each other, but our path to the northwest is completely blocked in with rubble. And continuing the loop, we see that the path to the southwest is blocked in with rubble, so this is effectively a dead end. This then is the furthest northeastern point in downtown DC. The Republic of Dave is the furthest northeastern point in the entire map, but this is the furthest one downtown, and the very end of the White Line. We don't find anything else in this parking lot, so to move forward, we have to go backwards. Otherwise, we bump into the edge of the Capital Wasteland map. We see that by firing the artillery strike, we alerted the nearby Talon Company. We find the path all the way back to the metro station, swarming with more Talon Company, and they even brought sentry bots. And that is the full story of Takoma Park, Tacoma Industrial, and the tragic fate of Isabella Proud. This brings up a question. Who was Isabella working for? We get that she's a researcher, we understand that she's a scientist, and she wants to learn more about ghouls, but why? To satisfy her own personal curiosity? Or was she working for a bigger player? A player who maybe wants to weaponize ghouls, use them as fighters on a battlefield perhaps. Or maybe to learn from them to develop some sort of antidote, or maybe a medication to help prevent people turning into ghouls. There are any number of possible motives for wanting to study feral ghouls, but I'm having a hard time believing that Isabella was just some random wastelander who was curious and decided to set up this research. So who was funding this expedition? Was it the Enclave? The Brotherhood? Or was she working with Talon Company? We know that Talon Company was already here before many of them were killed or pushed out by super mutants. Could she have been a Talon Company scientist? But then that raises an even bigger question. Who's funding the Talon Company? We learn from Fallout 3 lore that the Talon Company takes on those jobs that other mercenaries turn down. But we never learn who gives them those jobs. So what are your thoughts? Share them with me in the comments section below. I publish lots of new Fallout videos every week here on my channel, so if you want to make sure you don't miss my next episode, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I have completely unique designs in my shirt shop. My shirts come in a variety of both men's and women's sizes, and you can find them in a wide array of colors. The designs come on other things besides shirts, smartphone cases, pillows, posters, prints, etc. So if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon this week with a brand new video.